If you like risk, you have to risk it. Now, as I talk about this, there's this video playing here, which is from a skateboarder guy. I know most people watching this don't care about that, but going for a very risky gap, a very risky jump. And initially, you'd look at this and you'd think, and perhaps I'll put the clip over here because it's not playing right away, you'd think, why go for that? You're hurting yourself. You're scared of it because it takes a certain sort of bravery to go for it. And you'd think, why are you doing this? Because for most of these guys, it's not about money. It's not about really fame. Because they would do it regardless. If they weren't famous, they would do it anyway. I remember when I was younger and I skateboarded, not to this level, but you would do things that you have to be there looking at the stairs and you have to be there like building up the courage to do this. And if someone were to come up to me and ask like, why are you doing, what's the point? Well, back then I wouldn't have an answer. I'd just be like, well, I don't know. But now I have an answer. And I think this goes for, well, every facet of life, whether it's a sport or a hobby or your career or whatever. And fundamentally, the reason why we do these things and why we risk it is because we can't not to. It really is not an option. Like if you are someone that likes risk and is called to risk, and I'm not saying that you have to put your life in danger or do stupid things, not like that, but if it calls for you and if life feels a bit boring and a little, too few without certain risks, even in things that are safer, if you like to take the riskier option, then I would say here that, first of all, it is very frustrating if you're surrounded by people, when you're younger, especially adults, telling you, you know what, don't go for that. Play it safe. You don't need to risk all this right now. It's not smart. You just play it safe and then things will be better. And logically, perhaps if what you're after is a safe career and a little bit of money and whatever, but there is much more to life than that. And if you have this impulse, this need, this something inside you that calls, and that if you skateboard, you see the stairs and something's like, I gotta try it, within reason, of course. Or if I don't know, even like now I play golf and you see the dangerous shot and something tells you, even though it's not risky at all physically, but it is risky within that context, you're like, I just gotta go for it. I can't be here just playing it safe, because if I do play it safe, I will regret it. And I know it. Even if it goes as well as it can, I'm always gonna be wondering, excuse me here, something in my nose. What if I actually went for what I felt like and it worked? Yes, sometimes, a lot of times it doesn't work. Sometimes I get hurt physically, emotionally, my bank account suffers, whatever. But sometimes it works. And even if it doesn't work, when it doesn't work, the attempt alone is worth it. And when you're there on the floor, hurt, and you're like, like this guy was like, and you're bleeding out of your lip and all that, you just get up and you try again. Because it is worth it to attempt it. And if you attempt it enough, you get it. Then when you get it, it doesn't matter how many times you fell, it doesn't matter how much you had to suffer, because now you got it. And even beyond that, because I'm getting too much into what you get out of it, but that's not the point. It's not what you get out of it, of rewards, of recognition, of money. It's not that. It's what you get out of it, out of your own fulfillment of doing it, of feeling the call to risk, and then overcoming that barrier of fear of being afraid of if you're going to get hurt, if you're going to lose a lot of money, if people are going to laugh at you, if you're going to be ridiculed, if all of these things. It is perhaps the closest thing we have to a moment of freedom, of breaking through, of the chains breaking, and now you're free. Of when you scream when you thought you couldn't scream, when you jump when you thought you couldn't jump. It is just freeing, and it feels right. Now, if you are someone that you listen to this and you're like, well, I've never really felt that. I never really felt like I had to take that riskier shot or the riskier jump or whatever, then, well, this isn't for you. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing, one is not better than the other here. It's totally dependent on the individual. The problem is that if you are one of these individuals, to a certain extent, that you do feel that call for risk and you do want to take these riskier chances, even if sometimes they do feel a bit irresponsible and a bit too dangerous and you can't logically explain them. The problem with not following this, at least sometimes, at least following your gut sometimes, is that yeah, you're gonna go live a life that's a bit safer, and perhaps you're gonna get, some, some money, a nice, decent job, the typical sort of thing that we talk about here. But the problem is that that need is always gonna be there. And if it is not fulfilled, what ends up happening is that you're gonna channel that to something very unhealthy. And the most unhealthy nowadays that most people do is perhaps gambling. That's why you see it so much, because it's, it gives you an easy way to just, risk it. But it is risking it in a way that is not responsible at all. Makes no sense. And because you're gonna lose and you're gonna feel bad about it, it's gonna make you all sorts of conflicted about this feeling that is not bad. You just don't know how to use it, you just don't know how to follow it correctly, because for so much of your life, through school, through university, through all this, you've just been listening to people in your ear that do not feel the same way that you do. And it's fine they don't feel that way. And it's fine that you feel a different way. What is not fine is to try to push this down and shove this down and to assume that you have to follow what others tell you. Because you don't. And I know this is obvious, and I know for some of you it's painfully obvious, but for some it's not. And for some, if you really think about it, for how long have you been rejecting this call to adventure and to risk and to, even in the small things, even just going to a restaurant, and I know it's ridiculous, but just ordering something completely out of the ordinary. Haven't you grown so afraid of even the smallest amount of risk, when deep down, for those that identify with this, that you are called to risk it. And you're called to risk it much more than you currently are. And you are perhaps called to, and I'm not saying you should, evaluate it for yourself, but perhaps you're called to, risk it and quit that job and go figure it out in a shitty job by the beach as you figure out your business. Maybe you're called, when you're out and you see that girl you want to go talk to, you're called to risk it and go talk to her. Or you're called to, who knows? Only you know. But if you do know, and if you do feel it, it is not to be ignored. Within reason, of course. Don't go do any illegal things, or don't go killing yourself, of course. But if we look at even like rally pilots or F1 pilots or the Red Bull people, the BMX guys, would have been better if they would be just like, no, this is too risky, I'm not going to do it. Even if they get severely injured doing it, all of them will tell you no. Here with my legs broken, I'm happier than I could have ever been if I didn't follow this. If I was just like, I'll just take the safe path. I won't do this. It's a bit too dangerous. No. And you have to decide it for yourself. It's not me saying, disclaimer to go and, go do backflips on a BMX right away. Of course not. But if it is for you, well, you don't really have an option, because it's either that or the regret of not doing it. And the difference here is that pursuing these things, you will suffer, whether that's physically in the pain of injuries, or emotionally if you follow a business or something like that, and the stress and the loneliness, and you will suffer. There's no doubt about it. But it is a completely different suffering to do those things in pursuit of something that matters to you. And that once you get used to that suffering, you even welcome it in a certain extent, because it's a purposeful suffering. And the other side of that, the other pain of never following that, is the one of regret. And the pain of regret hits much sharper, much deeper, and it cannot, a lot of times, be corrected. You can move on from that point and do better, but what happened, happened. And you never know when it's going to be the last day. You never know when you're going to be walking on a crosswalk and some car hits you, and that's that. And then all that playing it safe, all that saving and ever going for it, where did that get you? And even if that doesn't happen, you get to 80 years old, where did that get you? It got you to a point where now you're wishing you could go back and risking it. Well, you're at that point right now. So why don't you risk it right now?